Okay, so now I'm going to take those same intervals that I was looking at, and instead of augmenting them, I'm going to diminish them. And of course, you remember that to diminish an interval means to contract it 1/2 step. So if I measure the distance from the floor to the ceiling, I need to either raise the floor or lower the ceiling in order to contract the interval by a 1/2 step. So let's go ahead and start with those same intervals that we were using in the previous example. We had started with an A to an E, and we had determined that that was a perfect fifth. Same accidental on top and bottom, and they're both notes of the A scale. Let's go ahead and diminish it by lowering the top note. So I'll put a flat on that note, and I'm going to call that a diminished fifth. And I can also come back to that same original interval of the perfect fifth, and if I raise the bottom note, raise the floor, I will also contract that interval. So this is also a diminished fifth. The second interval that we looked at was from F to B flat. This is a fourth interval. Remember, with both this only works with fourths and fifths. That we're looking to see if the top and the bottom note have the same accidental. Now, these don't have the same accidental, but this is that one unusual interval, the F to B. So what we did is we looked at the key of F and saw that it did have the B flat. So we're pretty safe in calling this a perfect fourth because it fits in the F scale. Let's go ahead and diminish the perfect fourth. Let's do it both ways. Let's lower the ceiling. Can you figure out how you would have to lower a note that already has a flat? Well, we have a tool for that. It's called a double flat. And a double flat is written with two flats. So this is a diminished fourth. I just wrote a D. I also could have written it out like this, diminished fourth. Another option to make that interval smaller would be to raise the floor. So I can raise the F by putting a sharp on it like this and keeping the B flat. So this also would be a diminished fourth. Okay. The next interval that we looked at was the interval from G sharp to D sharp. I'm going to go ahead and put that here. Same accidental on the top and the bottom, so this is a perfect fifth, and we're going to go ahead and diminish this, and we can do that by either lowering the ceiling or by raising the floor. Let's start by lowering the ceiling. If something is a sharp and you want to lower it, all we have to do is put a natural on it. So that is a diminished fifth. Or another possibility would be to start with the original, which is the D sharp, of course, on the top, and raise the bottom note. Oh, how do you raise a note that already has a sharp? If you want to raise it some more, you've got to put a double sharp on it. So that's another example of a diminished fifth. Okay, so if you understand these concepts, you understand that augmented means to expand an interval, and diminished means to contract an interval, you are ready for this. This is Check Your Understanding 21.1. And this is where you have to examine a series of intervals and label each one. In other words, one of these is going to be perfect. And then you're going to identify all the other intervals in the set. So because I know from G to D, if the accidental is the same on the top and the bottom, it's a fifth, it's not the interval from B to F, then I know that this one must be the perfect fifth. Now that I know that, I can look at this and say, oh, look, the ceiling has been raised, so therefore this is an augmented fifth. I'm always comparing back to this. Here, again, I'm comparing back to the original, and I'm seeing that the floor has been lowered. So this is also an augmented fifth that causes an expansion. Looking at this one and comparing to here, we can see that the ceiling has been lowered, creating a contraction. So this is a diminished fifth. And then we finally look at this where we see that the bottom note has been raised. So that causes a contraction. I call that a diminished fifth as well. I'm going to skip down to number 3. This is the interval. Actually, no, I'm going to skip down to number 4. Let's do this one together. Notice that in this one, the span is from B to F. Now that is the one that you have to be very careful about, because you can't just get the same accidental on the top and bottom and expect that that's going to be a perfect interval, because those little tricks don't work when it goes from the B to the F. So the best thing you probably can do there is go ahead and do it the way you could do any interval, and that is by writing the key signature of the lowest note. Now, we can see that the lowest note could be B sharp, B flat, it could be any one of these. I'm just going to pick one. I'm going to do it from B and write the key signature of B, which is 5 sharps. And I'm going to start on a B, count up 5 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I can see that from a B to an F sharp, because that's in the key signature, this must be the perfect fifth. As long as it conforms to the key signature, then it's a perfect interval. Where is that B to F sharp? We're in the bass clef here. I hope you can see it right there. That's the B to F sharp. So this one would be the perfect fifth. So let's backtrack. Let's look at this one. And we're going to compare each of these intervals to the perfect fifth. Do you see how the floor has been raised, contracting that interval? Therefore, that is a diminished fifth. Let's look at this one. Can you see that the floor has been lowered compared to that one? So if you take the interval and lower the floor, you can see it expands the interval. So this is an augmented fifth. We're going to take this one and compare it back to the perfect fifth. Notice the floor is the same, but the ceiling has been raised. It went from sharp to double sharp. So that expands the interval. We'll call this an augmented fifth. And finally, we get to the last one where the bottom note is the same, but the top note, which was an F sharp for the perfect interval, now is a little bit lower as an F natural. That contracts the interval. Therefore, this is a diminished fifth. So at this point, I think you're in good shape to go ahead and try these rows that I didn't do. First is to try to find which of these are the perfect, and then compare all the other ones to the perfect interval and label them. These are octaves. Octaves work the same as fourths and fifths because octaves are also considered, if they are the same on top and bottom, they're considered perfect intervals.